I would like to call upon Dr. Suganya Ananda Kichanan. He is going to talk on the talk is titled Protecting the Protector. You know, Bhagavan Sri Krishna is a Purāṇa Avatara. He was aware that he is Sriman Narayana and has all the powers. Even when he descended on earth, he knew. And he was conscious of his powers throughout. Who is there on earth to protect him? He is the protector of Periyalvar. On one occasion, when Sriman Narayana and Sri Mahalakshmi appeared on the sky, they wanted to come and see Periyalvar in the King's Court, in Madurai King's Court. They wanted to come and bless him, but he saw them coming. He thought immediately that evil eyes will be cast on the Lord and his consorts, and therefore he immediately composed and sang a Pallanda. Pallanda means you please live for many years. He blessed the God, thinking that God needs that blessing because evil eyes will be cast on the God himself. So, like, I am reminded of that when I read Dr. Suganya's title. Dr. Suganya has done a PhD at the Universitat Hamburg. She did it on Kulasekara Arulāla Tirumozhi. She spoke about it in the last seminar we had. She has published a philosophical translation of this work, along with that of the whole medieval commentary in Manipravalam by Periyavachan Pillai. Periyavachan Pillai is still considered the authority for interpreting Divya Prabandham. After working for some Tamil project for 4 years, she is currently a doctoral fellow at the Center for the Studies of Manuscript Cultures, University Tāt Hamburg. Research interests include Tamil Bhakti poetry, medieval Sri Vaishnava writings in Manipravalam, commentary traditions in India, Tamil Sanskrit interactions, and the transmission of texts via manuscripts in South India. Our entire work is also available on the web. Dr. Suganya, kindly present your paper.
Asmat Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. Thank you so much, sir. Namaskaram, everyone. I would like to begin by thanking Swamiji for having me today and TKP, sir. And it's an honor to give this talk today, especially since it's Vedanta Deshika's 752nd birthday, and apparently also Swamiji. So happy birthday, Swamiji. I also thank Narendran, sir, who is a librarian at the French Institute of Pondicherry, who helped me get hold of some of the rare books that I have used here. So let's get into the topic without further ado. But before I do so, let me say that I was unable to share my PowerPoint. As TKP sir says, I wholly depend on my PowerPoint usually. For some reason, it's not working. So I'm going to try and still make myself intelligible despite not having my PowerPoint shared with the audience. So one of the most popular and influential Puranas, even in the 20th century, is, as we know, the Bhagavatapurana, and it was rendered into many different Indian languages already in the pre-modern period, including in Tamil. And in Tamil, it was done twice in the 16th century. And unfortunately, it is very little known, especially nowadays. So that's why I thought I would speak on this. So let us talk about these Puranas in Tamil and see how close they were to the Bhagavatapurana in Sanskrit. So did they follow the Bhagavatapurana faithfully, or did they diverge, innovate in order to adapt to their own times, geographic context, and needs, etc.? So while answering these questions, I shall give you a glimpse of Krishna in the Dashama Skandha. Now, as we know, Krishna is mostly portrayed as the protector, but I have intentionally chosen to catch him in moments when he's in a vulnerable position and is himself in need of protection, at least according to the others. So the plan was to introduce the two Bhagavatams first. And anyway, I think speaking about the Bhagavatam is exactly the same thing as speaking about Krishna, because as we know, when he left the world, he left behind the Bhagavata. Also because like so few people know, even the Tamil people don't actually know so much about these Bhagavatams. So I will give a quick intro to the two Bhagavatams and show how, and then move on and show how they can be very close to the Bhagavatapurana, first of all, and then move on to show how they can be quite different if they choose to. So the two Bhagavatams then, let me try if I can see if I can still not share my PowerPoint. Too bad. So the first Bhagavatam is called the Cevvai Sooduvar Bhagavatam. Cevvai Sooduvar is the author. And the Bhagavata is also known by the names of Bhagavatapuranam or Itihasa Bhagavatam. I'll tell you why in a minute. And Vindu Bhagavatam. Vindu is the Tamil, one of the ways of rendering Vishnu in Tamil. And it is dated around the beginning of the 16th century. The author, Cevvai Sooduvar, he was also known as Madhava Pandita, but we don't know if he was called Madhavar or if he was somebody who was deemed to have made a great penance. He was a Choriya Brahmin from the Pandya land. So he's from the south. And the Cevvai Sooduvar Bhagavatam is composed of 4,973 verses, so almost 5,000 verses in 155 adhyayas, and very much like the Bhagavatapurana, which it follows very, very closely, as you will see, it is divided into 12 skandhas. And it has very few descriptive passages and sticks to the essential. So the story keeps moving forward. It is more like an itihasa, not merely a kavya or a Purāṇa, at least according to one of the critics, modern day critics. And it was edited by Uvire Swaminatha Iyer, Uvesa, as we know him, who thought very highly of this poetry. Now, the second Bhagavatam is by somebody called Aruḻāla Dasar, also known as Varadaraja Iyengar. And this Bhagavatam is known as the Purāṇa Bhagavatam as opposed to the Itihasa Bhagavatam. And this has 9,147 verses. That's close, slightly over 9,000 verses. And it is divided into 130 padalams. And there are no skandha divisions. And it is also, it calls itself oftentimes Vasudeva Kadai, the story of Vasudeva or Vasudeva's son. And Aruļāla Dasar was a Sri Vaishnava Brahmin from Srirangam, whose hereditary duties included service at the temple. And he may have moved to a place called Nelli in the south, deeper south, because yes, I'm already in the south of India, but it's deeper than that. And he probably lived there the rest of his life. And the work gives a clear date. It's the Shaka year 1465, which corresponds to 1543 of our era. Now, the whole structure of the Aruļāla Dasar Bhagavatam is different, very different from the Bhagavatapurana. As I said, there are no skandha divisions, but only padalams. And also the story begins, even though the story begins with the ascetics in Naimisaranya, where with the Sutta appearing, it very quickly moves to Rukmini, to her birth and her growing up. And a large part of the work is actually presented in the form of stories that Narada tells Rukmini of Narayana's various incarnations, for example, as well as Krishna's birth and exploits, and that's how she decides to get married to him. And then the story proceeds straight ahead from there. And in addition, the Aruļāla Dasar Bhagavatam also contains many stories that are not present in the Bhagavatapurana, like those of Nappinnai and Tadipandan. I'll come back to that later if we have the time. And it also incorporates many prabandhams, like there's a Tirupalli Irchi to awaken a divine being. There are Unjal songs everywhere. So Unjal songs are those that accompany people who swing to and fro. And Dasar's description of Rukmini's childhood is very close to Periyarva's Pillai. So let's see now what happens with the Bhagavatapurana. So in order to compare these two Bhagavatas with the Bhagavatapurana, I have picked one passage, namely the birth of Krishna, and compare how the three works deal with it. Now it's going to be a bit difficult without the PowerPoint, but let me try. I'll try. I won't be able to read the Sanskrit verses simply because I don't have the time. So you'll have to bear with the translations, and all translations from the Sanskrit of the Dashavaskanda are by Edwin Bryant. I have translated the Tamil ones myself. So this is from Bhagavatam 10, 3, 9 and 10. So this is when Krishna is born. Tamadbhutam balakamam bhujekshanam chaturbhujam shankhagada Srivatsalakshmam galashobhikaustubham pitambaram sandrapayoda saubhagam Maharhavaidurya kirita kundala trisha parishvakta sahasrakuntalam uddamakancham gadakankanadibhir virochamanam vasudeva aikshata. So Vasudeva saw that amazing lotus-eyed child, his forearms wielding the weapons of the conch, club, lotus, and disc. He bore the mark of Srivatsa, and the Kaustubha jewel was radiant on his neck. Clad in a yellow garment, he appeared as beautiful as a dark green cloud. He was resplendent with a magnificent belt, an arm and wrist bracelets, and his profuse locks were encircled with a lustrous helmet and earrings made of valuable Vaidurya gems. So as we can see, Krishna was born in full splendor, bearing signs of Narayana, with the divine weapons, but also other signs like the Srivatsa mark and the Kaustubha gem. And Vasudeva praises him following that, and it's followed by Devaki, during which she says, I'm just reading the translation here, quote, "Let that sinful one not know about your birth in me, O Madhusudana. My mind is disturbed and I'm trembling with fear of Kamsa on account of you, O Lord of the universe. Withdraw that transcendent form. It has four arms and is adorned with the splendor of lotus, club, disc, and conch." So Devaki addresses him as Madhusudana and Lord of the universe. Now, it is worth noting that the slayer of Madhu, Madhusudana, is a reference to the primeval form of Lord, who killed Madhu as well as Kaitavha when they attacked a newly born Brahma, even before Brahma could start creation. So she seems to know that he's the Lord in terms of time, because he's primordial, but also in terms of space, because she refers to him as the Lord of the whole universe. And yet, in the very next sentence, she says she fears for his life. She wants to protect him like she would a normal child, forgetting that he's the Lord of all who has come to protect them, which she knows. So her maternal instinct takes over and makes her contradictory and probably even irrational. But then we can't forget that she's a traumatized mother whose newborn babies were brutally murdered. So what does Krishna do? Well, he reassures them, Vasudeva and Devaki, and tells them that he showed his form just to remind them of his previous birth. Otherwise, knowledge of his real nature would not arise because of his appearance as a mortal. And then we proceed to the next verse in the Bhagavatapurana, which is 10:3-46. So after speaking in this way, Lord Hari fell silent and immediately changed into an ordinary child through his Yogamaya power of illusion, while his parents were watching. So Krishna allays thoroughly his parents' fear with his words, but also by changing himself, thereby allowing them to protect him, even when he doesn't need it. So the Sri Vaishnava Acharyas like to say that Rama obeyed his father when he was 27 years old. It took him that long to obey his father, whereas Krishna obeyed his parents barely a few moments after his birth. And yet Rama is known for his Pitruvachana Paripalanam, not Krishna. Anyway, to recapitulate, we've seen so far that Krishna is born with a divine form, with signs of divinity, and he hides them following his parents' request. Now let us see what Cevvai Sooduvar Bhagavatam does with this passage. So I'll just read the first verse of this. Tāmarai karanangin vensangodu tadalvai nemi venkadai niraidar tāmarai nilava தேமலர் தொடை மார்பினில் திருமரு சிறப்ப தாமர் கட்டெழிற் கவுத்துவங் களத்தினர் கவின. The sentence hasn't ended yet. We'll read some more later. So here's the translation. As along with the quiet conch, a hot discus with fiery mouths, a cruel mace, and a lotus with rows of petals remained in the four lotus hands, as the sacred Srivatsamul shines upon his chest with honeyed flower garlands, as the great desirable loveliness of the Kaustubhajam is graceful at his neck, etc. So we can see that the same list appears here. Maybe the only difference is that every weapon has an adjective to qualify it: wide, hot, cruel, etc. Maybe it's a very Tamil thing to do to create a certain impact in the audience. Reader, I mean not reader, but audience first, but nowadays reader. So the sentence doesn't end here. So the next bit of the verse is, as the blazing crown of gems spreads out sun rays, casting aside the darkness of wickedness, as the pretty armlet sparkles, as the golden earrings which glitter on his lustrous face that ridicules the moon with white rays, scatters light, as the belt of many rows of pearls lay upon the golden garments. And it goes on, this is the next verse. as his body, that is eye-catching like the cyan of a cluster of great clouds, sprinkles iridescent light, as his red lotus eyes poured grace. The pure one wearing tulsi with fragrant flowers appeared as a miraculous infant, at seeing whom Vasudeva was astonished. So we can see here, we can notice that the semantic field of light is hard to miss, and it is as striking as in the Bhagavatapurana. So we have words like fiery, blazing, sun rays, sparkle, glitter, lustrous, white rays, iridescent light. So it's bright everywhere when he's born. And this goes against, and because this eradicates the darkness of the night in which he is born, of the prison, of the parent situation in life, of the whole world to some extent. So here the light has come to eradicate darkness in all its forms, and that too despite being very dark himself. So here too we have a glorious portrait of the divine that is drawn, in which Krishna is born with 4 hands, holding his weapons and with distinctive marks, just like in the Bhagavatapurana. So it is something very important. So how do the parents react here in this Cevvai Bhagavatam? The mother says, it's Devaki who speaks, "O warrior who bent the upright end of the great superior bow in order to sever the deep roots of Rakshasas of blazing furor, I have been afraid of the death with harsh eyes who gets to be called Kamsa. I'm afraid he will certainly want to destroy you." So here too, clearly the parents know of the divine nature of the child, who is addressed here as the warrior, meaning Mahavira, this is Rama, with the allusion here not being to the Pararupa, the supreme form of Narayana, like in the Bhagavatapurana, but rather to one of his avatars, Rama. And even Rama, he's not just called Rama, he's referred to as a warrior who tamed his magnificent bow and who rooted out terrifying demons. So he has experience and practice in killing awful people, and all these attributes point to his prowess, and yet she's worried for his safety. That is why Devaki makes an explicit request, and that is the following verses, in which she asks him to change his divine appearance. And predictably, Krishna changes his divine form, and I'm quoting here from the verse. Endranan avvuru ihandu mamani kundranan oru pasum kuravi ayinan. So he who said that left behind that form, and he who was like a great mountain, a sapphire, became a tender infant. So the poet here draws the parallel between what Krishna is in reality and what he chooses to become to appease his mother, emphasizing on the change of size and power, and also meaning from a mountain to a baby, but also in terms of solidity to fragility. All this to satisfy the devotees. So we can see that on the whole, the Cevvai Bhagavatam closely follows the Bhagavatapurana, at least as far as this particular passage is concerned. So let us see what Arulala does with the same passage. So I'm reading this verse. So, Pongilada ettam tidi pondida, Singanayiru Rohini சேர்ந்தனாள், சங்கநேமி தரித்த கைதன்னுடன் செங்கண்மால் சிறந்தே உதயம் செய்தான். So, as the 8th lunar day, without the moon in the bright half came, meaning the Krishna Paksha, on the day on which the Rohini asterism joined the sun in Leo, that is Avani, the red-eyed Mal appeared in an illustrious way with hands that bore a conch and a discus. The weapons appear again. So it's important. So how do the parents react? The mother says, Vanjan innum kanjan madiyilon bandidam intra anjinam yam. So she says, we are afraid that Kamsa, the deceitful man, the foolish man might come. So we can see that both Devakis berate Kamsa, and here too, his potential arrival causes fear in the mother. So she wants to protect him. But something else happens in this particular Bhagavata. She goes on to say, Sodi urai ketu tuludu pitavum tayum adi uru tindadarku indru anjuvom indru araya. So after listening to the words of the light, meaning Krishna, the parents say, the father and the mother declared, we fear to touch your primal form today. So I think Arulāḻa Dasar diverges slightly from, maybe doesn't diverge, it just adds a bit from the other two versions, because Krishna conceals his original form, not just because Devaki is worried that Kamsa might recognize him and want to kill him, but also because she finds, both the parents find his form too impressive. It's too divine, too impressive for very simple people. And this reminds me of Arjuna asking Krishna to hide his Vishwarupa, to come back to normal, because he's too afraid of that Rupa. Anyway, we can see that these contradictory feelings of Devaki and Vasudeva, who are both parents but also devotees, who seem to know Krishna for what he is. And this is very interesting, I think. And also it is almost as if they know that he's there to protect them eventually, but till then they try to protect him out of instinct almost. So other than getting a glimpse of the newborn Krishna here, we also saw that the Tamil Bhagavatams follow very closely the Sanskrit Bhagavatam. However, this is not always the case, at least not for Aruḻāla Dasar's Bhagavatam. Now, Cevvai Sooduvar's Bhagavatam is impressively close to the Bhagavatapurana so far as I have checked. So I'm just going to read a bit from, so we are coming to the final part, which is distinctions, differences with the Bhagavatapurana. So I'm going to pick another occasion where Krishna is in a situation where he requires protection, in a legend that is famous, very famous in the Tamil land, but hardly known to either the Sanskrit Puranas or even the Arvas. It's Dadipandan, the potter's story. And this potter hides Krishna inside his pot when an angry Yashoda, chases Krishna. And he refuses to let him out till he gives liberation to both Dadipanda, but also his pot. So the story actually emerges only in the second millennium, with a reference here and there in the Sri Vaishnava Acharya's writings. But it is given a proper expression only in this Bhagavata, to my knowledge. There may be elsewhere. So the Dipandan story in this Bhagavata is inserted in the middle of chapters dealing with Krishna's childhood activities. Let us now look at what Dasar does, because he varies a bit. And then he shows very clearly how the protector, that Krishna is protector by somebody who actually is actively seeking his protection. So I will begin in medias res, meaning in full action, as you can visualize, if you can, Yashoda running at full speed to catch Krishna. And it seems that Krishna runs so much in his life, it can make a topic on its own. He just runs away from people and runs here and runs there. Anyway, so we're going to see him now being chased by Mother Yashoda. I'm going to read the Tamil because it's a very, very nice verse. It's very, it's vivid. It's a vivid description which involves all our senses, our visual sense, our oral sense, etc. So if you can try to imagine Yashoda sprinting here, please do. அன்னை தன்னை அடிக்க வருகின்றாள் என்றாண்டு அகப்படாதே முகுந்தன் நிலத்தில் ஓட மின்னடையில் கலை அசைய குழல் மென் மாலை வீழ்ந்திட நல்விரி சிகையின் மணிகள் மின்ன பொன்னின் மணி சிலம்பரற்ற வளைகள் ஆர்ப்ப புகரிப கோடனைய முலையாரம் ஆட அன்னமென நடக்கும் மின்னாள் ஓடியே அவ்வச்சுதனை பிடித்திட தான் அணுகும் காலை. So the sentence doesn't end here. So as Mukunda ran on the ground, not getting caught there, as mother was coming to smack him, at the time when the lightning-like woman who walks like a hamsa ran and drew close to that Achyuta to catch him in such a way that the belt moved on her lightning waist, the soft garlands of her locks fell off, gems glittered on her pretty disheveled hair, the anklets with golden beads tinkled, the bracelets roared, the pearl necklaces upon the chest like tusks of a spotted elephant danced. So as I said, the vivid description involves all our senses. So it's visual. So there are words like lightning waist, glittered, so we can imagine that, with an important field also of movement, ran, coming, catch, moved, fell off, danced. And it's oral, so we have words like tinkled and roared. And the smell is involved when they mention the garland, but also the touch when they say it's soft garlands. And it also has comparisons to help us imagine this. The lightning-like woman, like a hamsa, like tusks of a spotted elephant. So here's a magnificent description of Yashoda sprinting. So Krishna is in real trouble now, not from a malevolent force like Kamsa, but in dire need of shelter from his wrathful mother, a force to reckon with in her own right, I think, although a benevolent one. So what does Krishna do? So we move to the next verse. I can't read the Tamil, no time for that, so I'll read the translation. The Lord, who, giving a boon to Brahma as he begged, was born in the northern Mathura in order to remove the burden of the earth, then crossed the river and entered Yashoda's house. The Lord, that kind of Lord, reached the house in which dwelt Dadipandan, who watched for the arrival of the Supreme Being, having previously performed good tapas, being born with the knowledge, seeking the imperishable place, i.e. Vaikuntha, and living in Gokula And then he caught his feet and said. So what the dependent is going to say, I will say in a minute. So the poet draws here a parallel between the giver of refuge to Brahma and to the earth that required to be unburdened on the one hand, and on the other hand, the child that seeks shelter in a potter's house on the other. And we also get information on Dadipanda. So we know that he knows about Krishna, he knew it. He had the proper knowledge of things. So we know Jnana and Moksha, etc. So he's fit for Moksha anyway. And he was waiting for him in Gokula, and he had good merits from performing tapas in his previous births. And he was a mumukshu, desirous for moksha. So it's not a random potter, but still he's a potter. So we can also note an implied opposite movement in the paths of the two, the potter and Krishna. So the Lord came down from Vaikuntha to Mathura and then crossed the Yamuna to get to Yashoda's house, whereas the potter wishes to cross the Samsara, go up to Vaikuntha, possibly also to cross the Viraja Nadi and then get into it. Anyway, now in the place where Krishna reaches the shelter, Tadipandan catches his feet. So let us see how Krishna perceives this quintessential act of surrender. This is the next verse, of which I'm just going to read the translation. As he said, meaning Tadipandan, I have recognized you, the primal cause, who did not reveal yourself despite Aja, Brahma, on the flower, and people of great tapas performed good tapas that lasted for much time. Bless me with liberation. Achyuta graciously says today, your words are indeed erroneous. Mother is reaching here to catch and smack me, the child of Nanda. Please let go of the feet of poor me. Dadipandan smiled and indeed said. We'll see what he says, because Dadipandan gets really villainous here. So Krishna apparently allows himself to be known by Dadipanda, not by gods or the other ascetics, which shows his accessibility to his true devotees. So the parallel drawn here is between the allegedly great people and a mere potter, but also between the Adi, the primeval cause, who's unfathomable to the greatest, and the poor little Nanda's child who's about to be punished by his mother and who requires a potter to save him from her wrath. So please note that Krishna denies his original identity here and sees himself just as Nanda and Yashoda's child, and he sees Dadipandan's act of surrender requesting moksha as an act of capture. So this whole passage highlights the Saulabhya of Krishna. So here's the potter's reply. As you know, he smiles and he starts speaking to Krishna's claim. So this is how he reacts to Krishna's claim of being a mere human child. So Dadipandan says, will you confuse me today just as you caused illusion so that all gods beginning with Aja, the fragrant flower, remain with the I-ness, the conceit, thinking that they are gods with Rajas and Tamas having attached themselves to them? Graciously give the faultless place to me, who suffer from karma, for a few poor people that I'm pleased with, and the superior pot that I made. If you will not give it, I will betray and hand you over to Yashoda. So the Dipandit refused to be fooled by Krishna's lies and asks for moksha again, but not just for himself, actually for himself, for the pot that he made, and also for a few people of his acquaintance. So those are those extra bits that Aruḷāḻa Dasar seems to have added. It is very simple here. He will save Krishna if Krishna saves him. So let's see what happens next. So as Yashoda drew close, when he said that, Mayon said, I have granted the supreme state to everyone, you say, to you and to the pot in your hands. May you reach it. With Achyuta thus graciously ruling, they reached the sweet state, meaning the potter, etc. They reached the sweet state, going upon the cosmic egg, as ascetics saluted, fresh flowers were poured upon them, and many divine kettle drums thundered. The son of Nanda slipped off, being uncaught by mother. So Krishna agrees, and Dadipandan and company can go to Vaikuntha. And on the way, they are welcomed by divine beings. So Krishna relents, as we see, because the ominous danger is growing imminent by the minute with the mother approaching. So he says, okay, fine. And Dadipandan and his daughters are liberated, and so is Krishna from his mother's clutches. So it seems that it's a story of twin liberation, but probably even multi-liberation here. So let me conclude here. We can see that both the Bhagavatams in Tamil can be quite close to the Sanskrit work, but perhaps the Cevvai Sooduvar Bhagavatam is more so, maybe because the poet wanted something like a translation of the original Bhagavatapurana. On the other hand, the Aruḷāḻa Dasar Bhagavatam has imbibed local lore and the influence of the Arva poetry while remaining very true to the spirit of the Bhagavatapurana, I think. So Arulāla Dasar definitely opted for innovation in his work in order to adapt to his own time and local surroundings. And thereby, he also gave space to popular stories that were till then only probably transmitted orally or very sparsely here and there. So I hope to have shown you a glimpse of Krishna, the protected, rather than the Krishna, the protector, which is also a state enjoyed by the devotees like Periyarva, as Sripati sir pointed out right at the beginning. And before I finish, I would like also request people, anyone who knows publishers, for example, who might be willing to bring out these very, very hard to find rare books. It would be a great thing. For example, this Cevvai Sooduvar Bhagavatam was edited by Uve Swaminatha Iyer, and all his editions are very popular, very famous, but not this one. And this was done in 1949 and 1953 in 2 volumes. It was published by the Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam. And I don't think another edition has come out. So if they actually republish it, it'll be very, very useful. And the Cevvai Sooduvar Bhagavatam was first published in the 1880s, I think. So it's over 100 years old, so no copyright issues. So if someone would be forthcoming to publish those books, it'll be very useful, not just for the devotees, but also the Tamil buffs. Okay, this Arulāla Bhagavatam's work was re-edited and published slightly differently in 1989. But the older work published in the 1880s must be out of copyright now because it's older than 100 years. So if any one of you knows publishers willing to take up these works and get them published, it will be a great favor done upon all of us, actually. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sukanya, for an excellent illuminating talk. I am sure Swamiji will have something to say about this.
Yes, yes. I'm very, very happy that Dr. Sukanya has taken the trouble to explain about the Tamil Bhagavatams, because we know, I actually, when she told me about it, I said, I knew that there was a Mahabharatam in Tamil, but I never knew there were 2 Mahabharatam, Sri Villiputtūr Alvars, as well as another one which was there in the 9th century. But I never knew about the Bhagavatams. Then she explained about it to me, and I thought it was wonderful. And she's also made it come very much alive, the way the description of her, of Yashoda Devi running behind to catch Sri Krishna, all that made it as though we are there in Vrindavan. We felt like that. And I also want to say that regarding the republication of those books, if Sripati Mama will keep in touch with Dr. Sukanya about it, the foundation will be only too happy to publish it. If we can locate the owners of the copyright, we will ask them to their permission and we'll publish it. Because these are books which should be kept, which should survive for the future, that there is such a wonderful heritage that we don't know about. So, Dr. Sukanya, I hope that you will help us to...
Sure, sir. With pleasure, Swamiji.
We'll publish both the books.
Excellent, Swamiji. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And thank you for a very nice presentation.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you, Dr. Sukanya. I'll be in touch with you as Swamiji has commanded.